Hello and welcome to this astrological forecast for the remainder of the month of February 2025. With Pluto currently trine my ascendant, I recently had to take some time off to do a caffeine detox and get myself on a day schedule, making a full February forecast from me impossible. But now that that is complete, I wanted to still make a video examining the astrology of the rest of the month. One advantage to this turn of events is that the shorter time span of our analysis will allow us to look at things in greater detail. I'm hoping to get this video up on or soon after the 12th, which is perfect because that is the day of the full moon in Leo square Uranus. The full moon is when things really come to a head, and this full moon is definitely no exception. With it taking place in Leo, expect its events to be loud and dramatic. The dynamic between the individual and the collective is emphasized here. The tension that exists within all of us between our personal, spiritual journey through life and what we feel is our social responsibility to the society of which we are a part. Taking place 2 days before Valentine's Day, it is worth noting that Leo, where the moon currently is, represents a much more personal kind of love, while Aquarius, where the sun currently is, could be said to represent a much more idealized love. Neither is better than the other. Both are equally valid and essential aspects to the human experience. But wait, just when we thought we had this full moon figured out, its square to unpredictable Uranus adds a very strong element of sudden, unexpected change to the mix. So in addition to everything I just said, know that somehow this dynamic tension of the full moon is manifesting in such a way that either creates upheaval or goes hand in hand with it. Things are being shaken up in a dramatic way at this time. The sun, the moon, and Uranus are all in fixed signs that do not typically like change. But around the time of this full moon in Leo on February 12th, sudden change is happening whether we like it or not. Our minds enter a dream world on February 14th when Mercury ingresses into Pisces. To be honest, Mercury overall faces its greatest debilitation in Pisces, the sign of both its fall and detriment. This does not mean Mercury in Pisces is bad. It simply means that Mercury has a much harder time accomplishing its significations in Pisces than it does in any other sign. Those mercurial significations include but are not limited to speech, thought, communication, technology, mental focus, reading, writing, and travel. However, I would argue that the extra challenge to Mercury in Pisces presents a unique opportunity. Only within this cosmic environment are we pushed to expand our minds to the farthest reaches of the universe, unlocking deep veins of creativity, art, poetry, music, and a richness and fulfillment through intuitive perception that is far less common, if not impossible, under other conditions. Pay attention to what events manifest on this day. They are subtle signs of things to come. The dream continues on February 18th when the sun follows Mercury and makes its annual ingress into Pisces. This is a time of year when our conscious will or sense of purpose leans toward commitment to a dream or ideal. Lasting until mid-late March, we can feel that change is in the air as winter slowly gives way to spring throughout this time. By this point, we now have a total of 4 astrological planets, the Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Neptune, plus the North Node all in Pisces, indicating a shift away from the intellectual brilliance of Aquarius earlier in the month and towards the emotional and spiritual depths of Pisces later in the month. It is the perfect time for imagination and creativity as well as fantasy and escapism. But do be careful not to get lost at sea when you swim in the infinite ocean of Pisces. Since we are looking at a shorter time span this month, I thought it was worth noting that on February 19th, the moon in Scorpio makes its monthly opposition to Uranus, a day that always contains some sudden, weird, or otherwise unusual development. There's not much to be said about this other than that on February 19th, you should expect the unexpected. Our minds are pushed to expand past their limits on February 20th when mental Mercury forms a stressful square to jovial Jupiter. While potentially overwhelming, this could also manifest as something quite fun or satisfying, as Mercury continuing to make its way through Pisces has been searching for just the kind of expansion that Jupiter, the ruler of Pisces, naturally provides. Additionally, Jupiter is also in Mercury's sign of Gemini, making this a case of mutual reception where both planets benefit tremendously. Under this kind of Mercury-Jupiter configuration, we often come upon great knowledge or a major discovery that pushes us into new areas of activity, frequently involving the expansion of our worldview. It is a time when we must look at both the details and the big picture. Just make sure that as you explore these great mysteries, be they past, present, or even future, that you are not seduced by illusion nor delusions of grandeur. Forward movement when it comes to our actions or motivations begins to take place on February 23rd when Mars stations direct in Cancer. This is arguably one of the most important events not only of the month, but of the entire year. To understand how it impacts each sign individually, you can watch my 2025 year-ahead astrology forecast for your rising sign. Generally, however, we can say that Mars direct station on February 23rd represents a significant turning point in a larger story that first began in September or October of 2024 and does not conclude until May or June of 2025, involving increased effort or energy output in both the Cancer and Leo sectors of our individual charts. The reason for this is that Mars stationed retrograde in Leo in December then backed its way into Cancer from where it is now stationing direct, thereby connecting the two signs as well as their corresponding houses. What does this mean for all of us in our day-to-day lives? Expect things to slowly begin moving forward again, especially with whatever you have been struggling with or spending a lot of time and effort on over the past couple of months or longer. There is still much work to be done, but the path ahead now becomes more clear. We are not out of the woods, but we have found a map pinpointing our exact location in the woods. It is interesting that mental Mercury trines Mars right as it is stationing direct, suggesting there is something about communication, information, or travel that is strongly connected with this newly clarified direction having to do with our actions or motivations. Mars is also closely trined stern Saturn at the time of its direct station, indicating there is something stabilizing about accepting reality, discipline, or responsibility at this time. Expect this additionally to impact our relationships, feelings, or desires, with Mars currently ruling Venus in Aries, itself getting very close now to stationing retrograde. Finally, it is worth observing that Mars in its direct station is square to Chiron, telling us that our actions or motivations are creating ongoing stress with our unhealed wounds. There may be something we feel we have to do, but it is at cross purposes with the way in which we need to heal or learn. The goal and challenge, as always in this type of scenario, is to find a way to do what you have to do that is in harmony with the way in which you learn, teach, or heal. It is good to keep in mind in connection with this that Mars in Cancer can at times be hyperprotective, even to the point of paranoia, especially with its previous and upcoming opposition with Pluto. It is good to take action to protect what you care deeply about. Just try to make sure the actions you take are appropriate, rational, and good for everyone involved. There is a real risk here of lashing out at perceived threats, be they real or imaginary, and such lashing out, it is safe to say, is never the correct approach. Communication limits are reached on February 25th when talkative Mercury conjoins strict Saturn in Pisces. This can be thought of as a speed bump, an obstacle that slows us down but for good reason. It can also manifest as a mental reality check. The expansion of our minds experienced previously on the 20th when Mercury squared Jupiter reaches some kind of limit. Technological devices and other mechanisms may break down and need fixed, and those already broken may be fixed on this day. It is a time to think seriously about reality, especially its most illusory aspects. Watch what you say on this day, because your words will carry great weight. New beginnings swim into our reality on February 27th when we have the new moon in Pisces. This new moon is closely square Jupiter, suggesting that in the coming weeks we will be pushed to expand and grow. Jupiter is also the ruler of the new moon, and its current placement in Gemini again emphasizes this theme of expanding our minds. With such a mixture of Pisces and Gemini energy, this is a time filled with great wonder and curiosity. Psychic perceptions may be heightened in the coming weeks, and the emphasis is now much more upon going with the flow and rolling with the punches as we navigate this ever-changing terrain. Believe me, this is the last time you want to expect things to be business as usual if you don't want to have your expectations shattered. Though this is a forecast for February, we absolutely must talk about Venus stationing retrograde on March 1st before we wrap things up. And that is because for the entirety of February, Venus is traveling through its pre-retrograde shadow, setting things up for the retrograde and indicating that much of what we experience in February we will be revisiting over the next couple of months. Again, if you want to know how this will impact you personally, check out my 2025 year-ahead astrology forecast for your rising sign. But in general, we can say that Venus retrogrades are all about reviewing our relationships, be they with people, places, events, or experiences. It is a time of reconsideration of and reflecting on relationships. It is a process of transformation transformation. February is phase 1 of this process. March plus the first 12 days of April is phase 2. Halfway through April through the end of May is phase 3. The full reality of it is slightly more complicated than that, but this description will do for our purposes here. Relationships will be put to the test during this time. Past relationships may resurface. We will all be reviewing what we value most, as well as what we truly desire. This will be taking place in the Pisces and Aries sectors of our individual charts, since Venus will be stationing in Aries, then retrograding back into Pisces from where it will station direct, thereby connecting the two signs. It is interesting also to consider that right when Venus stations retrograde, its ruler while in Aries, Mars, has just stationed direct only 6 days prior, strongly suggesting a connection between the two events. Thus, I advise paying close attention to what happens in February, especially those events that seem to be just the beginning of more to come, for there is more to come, indeed. February 2025 is a month of mystical and illusory movement. Even as we are pushed to expand our horizons, we are actually only preparing to retread old ground. And just as we gain clarity in one area, we lose clarity in another area. Don't get me wrong, there is a movement of a kind happening, but it is a continuous hypnotic sway back and forth. We are getting ready to dive into the oceanic depths of Pisces before we can finally resurface in the primordial fires of Aries. Sudden dramatic change shocks us on February 12th when the full moon in Leo squares Uranus. Our minds enter a dream world on February 14th when Mercury ingresses into Pisces. We commit to our ideals on February 18th when the sun follows Mercury into Pisces. Sudden, unexpected developments shock us on February 19th when the moon in Scorpio opposes Uranus in Taurus. Our minds are pushed to expand past their limits on February 20th when Mercury squares Jupiter. Clear direction when it comes to our actions or motivations is found on February 23rd when Mars stations direct in Cancer. Communication limits slow us down on February 25th when Mercury conjoins Saturn. A fresh mystical cycle begins on February 27th when we have the new moon in Pisces. And while all of the aforementioned events are taking place, we are subconsciously preparing to reflect on our relationships, values, and desires as Venus gets ready to station retrograde on March 1st. So fasten your spiritual seatbelts and get ready to dream, for throughout the month of February, nothing is what it seems.